Hi, my name is Jenny Cooper. When I was 15 years old, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. And Graves' disease is an autoimmune disease, and it specifically targets your thyroid. For about 10 years, everything was controlled pretty well. Nothing crazy really happened. But last year, I started just not feeling very well, being tired more and more. And so I went to the doctor. I just figured, my levels were a little off. It wasn't really a big deal. So I went in, and sure enough, my levels were not where they needed to be, so they adjusted my medicine. It just felt like it kept getting worse and worse. And then I began to struggle breathing. It just felt like almost as if someone had their hand right here, and so I had to go back in, and with that, they discovered that I had nodules all up and down my thyroid, and all of these crazy things. So the doctor kept working with my medicine, trying to figure things out, and I just kind of kept going downhill. And I remember so many times just kneeling down by my couch and just praying and really just crying out to God and saying, God, I can't keep going like this. I'm so sick, God. Nobody truly understands how sick I am, but I need you to heal me. And I remember I would do that almost daily, just cry out to him, because I was a wife and a mom and a youth leader, and I had all of these things that were so important to me, and that I had to be there. I had to do these things and fill these roles. And I remember there were just so many times where I would wake up and feel like I couldn't even go on that day. The sickness had become so bad in my body. And when that began, the enemy began kind of to speak into my mind and begin to tell me, you're not good enough. You're not going to make it through this. You're not strong enough. This, disease, this sickness, it's going to overcome you. It's going to overtake you. All of these things begin to flood my mind. And I remember being so overwhelmed by these thoughts. Just the feeling of not being good enough, because being a wife and a mom and being a youth leader, those were three of the most important things in my life, and I knew that those were roles given to me by God himself. And so I began to battle with this mental stuff along with, this sickness, and it was very hard. It was very, very hard, and I know not many people knew all of what I was dealing with in this moment. And along with this, we began to struggle in our finances really bad. Times where we would literally just sit down and look at what was before us and think, what in the world are we going to do? How are we going to pay our bills? Things were just so bad. We were being hit from every corner, it felt like. And so we just began to pray. We began to say, God, you see where we are. You can provide for us, and we're going to trust in you for that. And all of a sudden, all these people started saying, hey, do you want to help us do this? Hey, I have this side job. Can you help me with this? And he provided every single need. We always met exactly our bills. And then as my sickness continued, my doctor started telling me, Jenny, you've got to make a decision. Your body cannot keep doing this. It's going downhill, and it's not good for you. And your body cannot keep up with you. There will be consequences, basically. And so I left that doctor's appointment and, said, okay, I'll let you know next time I come in. And I knew that God could heal me of all that was going on in my body. And so we just began to pray, and every time I would come to church, I would go up and I would be anointed and I would be prayed over, because I believed this so much. I believed in God so much, and his healing and what his word says. I knew it was true. And so we just prayed and prayed and prayed. And so we went back to the doctor, and my endocrinologist, had checked my levels again, and he said, this isn't good. You've got to make a decision today. And so I said, okay, I'm going to have the surgery. I'm going to have my thyroid removed. And I remember in that moment, sitting in that doctor's office, and as those words left my mouth, complete peace just showed up in that room. It just completely came over me, and I had felt so at peace like I hadn't in months. And I left that room a little confused about that. I began to kind of question myself, like, am I not having faith in God? Is this just the easy way out? Why do I feel this peace? I don't understand. But then I began to just kind of take a step back and say, you know what? I've been praying for peace. He gave me peace. That's all that matters. And so I had the surgery. I had my thyroid removed. And I remember the surgeon coming into the room and just being amazed at what just happened in surgery. He said that out of all the surgeries he had done, that my thyroid was one of the hardest he had ever removed. It had, it was so massive and it had hardened. It was just like a piece of cement sitting right here. And not only that, but it had begun to grow somehow and started to wrap around my trachea, and explaining why I was struggling breathing so much. And his mind was so blown by this. He kept just talking about it, like, I can't believe, what we just saw. And I remember just being kind of in amazement of that. Well, not long after that, I went back in for a checkup with him, and he was kind of just going over everything. And in that doctor's appointment, he told me that at the center of that hardened thyroid that was, like cement, that there was a spot in there, and it was stage 3 cancer. And I remember him saying to me, his exact words were, basically, we've just healed you of cancer. And the reason that it couldn't get out is because it was hardened up. It was encased in what was like cement. It couldn't move from that spot. And he said that down the road, that could have been a very hard road for you to walk, but now you're clean and you're free of this cancer. And I remember walking out of that doctor's room just with tears in my eyes and just kind of in amazement at God's perfect plan and his perfect timing, that he knew what I needed. We didn't know that was in there. The doctors didn't know. No one knew that was in there, but God knew. And all of these hard months I had been through with all this sickness and just feeling awful and all of this, it was for a purpose. And I stood in that moment knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. Throughout all this sickness, there was one thing that I had made up in my mind, that I was going to be in control and this sickness was not. That I was not going to let it keep me home from church events, from doing anything, because I was not going to let it ruin my life. And I felt so bad, and there were days where I'd wake up and just cry because I couldn't almost handle it. But I just knew that if I just stayed faithful to him and stood on what his promises are, that I was going to be okay. And through all of that, I never missed one thing. And I'm so thankful for that. A few months after all of this happened, we found out that we were expecting a baby, and we were so excited. We had a little boy, and we wanted to add to our family, and we had been waiting for this moment and, waiting for me to get through the sickness, because we just wanted another little baby so bad. And so we were just over the moon excited. And just not long, a few weeks after we found out we were expecting a baby, I started having all these kind of crazy symptoms and a lot of pain and things like that. And so we went into the hospital, and I remember we got to see our baby's little heartbeat, and the doctor kind of, checked everything, and I remember her looking at us and saying, "What I see isn't good, but don't be upset yet. Anything can happen. Anything can happen." And I just remember hearing those words, but I could see the sadness on her face. I knew what was coming. And so we went home, and I started to be in a lot of pain, and I knew that we were getting ready to have to say goodbye to our baby. And I just began to pray and pray and pray. And I remember getting a text from one of our friends saying, "We're going to be at your house in 1 minute. so be ready. And I was like, oh goodness, like this isn't the time for this. But I knew why they were coming. And so they showed up and they said, we're not going to let you sit here like this. We're going to pray through this, and you're going to make it through this, and you're going to be okay. And they just began to pray over me. And I knew in that moment that God still knew where I was. The next day, the pain started up again, and my body basically just went into full labor, and my heart just felt so completely shattered in that moment. It felt like that all the happiness that we had just been given back had been taken from us. And I went into the hallway, and I saw my husband sitting on the floor, and he already had tears streaming down his cheeks. And I sat down next to him and leaned against him, and I remember just looking at him and saying, why would God do this to us? Why would God give us this baby and take it from us in such a horrible way? Why would he do that to us? And he just looked at me and said, baby, I don't know. He just hugged me, and our little boy came up and he started wiping our faces, saying, Mommy okay? Daddy okay? And that was just the sweetest thing. It was just some comfort in that moment that, look at what I do have. I have this precious little boy, and he's checking on me. He's checking on my husband. It was a very hard thing to go through, and I think that until you deal with that, it's something that you can't even comprehend. I know I didn't. But a few months later, one of my friends lost a baby, and I remember standing in that hospital room with her. And in that moment, I realized that I knew exactly how she felt. I knew the pain that she was dealing with. I knew the heartache. I knew that she was probably dealing with these thoughts of, well, maybe if I would have done something different, or maybe if I would have done this or this or this, and blaming herself because I had walked through that. But in that moment, I realized that I could pray for her more passionately than I could have before. I could be there for her and understand her more than I could have otherwise. And so I took that as God saying, this is why I brought you here. She needed you. And I knew that that was part of the reasoning. I just felt it in my heart that I needed to pray for her. I needed to be there for her. She needed somebody that could say, I understand exactly what you're walking through right now. It didn't take the pain away completely. It didn't, heal my heart. Only God can do that completely. But it gave me a sense of feeling okay, that if I had to deal with this heartache and this heartbreak for her, then that's okay. And so over the next several months, I just began to feel kind of my heart begin to heal from this year. It began to kind of be put back together. And every time I would sit down and pray and just be in God's presence, it felt like a little bit more of me was being put back. It felt like I was being built back up, but stronger than before. And the heartache and the frustrations and the hurt and the sickness and all of that, when I would just come and sit in his presence, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what I had just walked through. All that mattered was that I was sitting right there with God, and he never had left me. He knew exactly where I was, and he's always there. There are so many hills and valleys in life, and I think that 2018 was one of my real deep valleys that I had to walk through to get where I am, to understand fully and completely who God is and what his word says is true. And so I think that if you're going through a valley, no matter how big or little you think it is, that if you'll just hold on to his promises, if you'll just hold on to his word, he will bring you through it. Because I stand here after all of that and so much more, stronger than before, healthier than I've ever been in my life, and more reassured of who God is and that His word is very much true. So just stand on that.